early. Andy, you can hit the smoke machine now. Just push this out a bit because I've got too many devices here. Check. Oh, there we go. Right. My name's Simon. Know some of you here. Thanks for coming along. I have a couple of businesses I co-founded. One of them is called Karma Drinks. We make soft drinks like these. The other one's called All Good, and we import fair trade bananas. But mostly I'm a graphic designer. I studied graphic design a long time ago. And I'm interested in folklore because the work I do depends on originality. And I'm always looking for new ideas I can steal. Ironically, history and folklore are good places to look for to provoke new ideas. I missed my little, just try this. Very important to get this first visual effect that I spent so much time trying to make work. There we go. Yeah. Sorry, it's the first time I've done this. We're pretty much hardwired to notice new things. The things we've never seen and heard, we have to recognise. It's a kind of survival mechanism. If we've already seen something, we've processed it and filed it and put it away. So when we see it again, we know what to do. Whether it's going to harm us or be useful, we've kind of figured that out. But if it's new, you need to think about whether it's going to harm you or be use for you. So we're more likely to pay attention to something that's new and original. And we get used to these patterns, and when we see a difference in patterns, we kind of notice them. Attention is really valuable. A lot of people are paying a lot of money for you to pay attention to them and competing for that. And when it comes to the actual news, it's not always easy to sort out the truth from the fact from fiction and what's useful from what's harmful. This is particularly important at the moment. We see so much information and it's really hard to understand just what to do with it. Now, I'm not here to talk about politics or show too much creative work. I wanted to sort of tell you how I've come to some of the work that I've done creatively. There's a lot of graphic design out there that you can see to be inspired. But I wanted to tell you a few stories about what's behind some of the work that we've done at All Good and Karma and some of the other places that we've been working for. And this has a lot to do with folklore. Now, I share my life with 3 women, my partner Jodie and 2 daughters, one of whom's here, and I think I've just broken some copyright laws and asked for her image or one of her paintings without actually asking permission for it until this morning. Thankfully she's here and so is our copyright lawyer. So. We also have 2 black cats and some plants. And the women all practice a kind of freestyle cult of animism. And I try and bend the plants to my will. But they mostly had more control over me than I do over them. Whenever the cats go near the woman starts speaking in a higher register than normal and making kissing sounds. And they believe the cats can understand them. And that the cats will do what they're told. But they don't. They're cats. The cats have been messing with humans for years. And they've evolved more successfully than we have. They don't need to work. They dominate social media. They get shelter, food, protection and health care without lifting a paw. The plants also get a lot of attention and they're just as insolent. If I don't water them, they don't grow. I'm going to go back a section. So, the things we live closest to have the greatest effect on our behaviour. When one of those cats responds with affection towards one of us, we feel good about it. And the fruit from those plants could be the most expensive lemons and tomatoes anyone's ever grown. By the time I've composted, watered, judged them, visited Bunnings, all the devotion to them has turned into a very small outcome. But I feel good when I share them, and they taste better because they give my friends something to stroke my ego about. We obsess over these things. We worship pets, other animals, plants, inanimate objects, just as much as we worship each other or care for each other. And we tell stories about them. And when those stories are retold, they become, and they capture our imaginations, they become folklore. And as they're told and retold, the facts are exaggerated. And sometimes the facts bear no resemblance to the story. Now a few years ago, we started looking into making a new soft drink, my business partners Chris and Matt Morrison and I. And we discovered that one of the world's oldest and most popular fizzy drinks didn't have any of the ingredients in its name. The reason for the omission of one of them was fairly obvious: it's illegal. But the cola nut isn't categorised by any drug classifications. Although the name Coca-Cola refers to two main ingredients, because of controversy over its cocaine content, the Coca-Cola company have explained that the name is meaningless but fanciful and no longer put cocaine in it. But its originator, a guy called John Pemberton, who was injured in the American Civil War and developed a morphine addiction, used to describe the drink as a valuable brain tonic that would cure headaches, relieve exhaustion and calm nerves, and marketed it as delicious, refreshing, pure joy, exhilarating and invigorating, which are bold claims for a non-alcoholic drug-free drink. Anyway, we were curious about this and we tried to get hold of some, and we learned that cola was more than a brand name. It comes from, you've probably seen this sequence, but you will have seen that sub-Saharan Africa used to be called a lot of different things. And the diagonal lines on here showed where cola was grown. Well, we discovered that we could get some cola from a place called the Gola Rainforest, which is in what we call now Sierra Leone. Now, thousands of years ago, before the invention of soft drinks, cola nut was traded in this area and used in rituals with a familiar jingle. They still say this: he who brings cola brings life. And today, if you go there or anywhere across the sub-Saharan Africa, West African area, you're likely, if you go to a rural village, to be visited, to be welcomed with the splitting of cola nut. This is the Gold Rainforest, and these people are harvesting cola nut from about 5 metres up in the canopy of the rainforest. When it's harvested, it looks like this. And this is Chief Karibo and I splitting cola in the village where we get the cola from. This area has a river running through it. It's called the Moa River. And it flows from the highlands that describe a line from that previous map between Guinea and Liberia and Sierra Leone. And it travels past a small village on its way to the sea called Boma, which is the village we principally trade with for cola. We met the people of Boma through a friend of ours, Albert Tucker, who's now the chair of our foundation, who helps us administer the money we make from selling Counterculture to the benefit of the villages that we work with. The river's the background for life in the village. People fish from it, they draw water from it, they travel along it in canoes. In the hot season when the river's down, this is probably in the rainy season. You can see how high it is and how much mud there is in the water. But people bathe along the beaches here. But there's a story about a spirit that lives in the river called Mummy Wata. And she has a kind of wild character like the river does. In the times when the weather's calm, she's very tranquil. And when the monsoon, the rainy season comes, she can be very tempestuous. The Mummy Wata is the Creole name for mermaid or mother water, river spirit. She's half human, half fish. It's found, and we know this because in our folklore we have ideas of characters like Poseidon and Neptune and mermaids that come from the sea. And just like the sea and the rivers she comes from, she can make good fortune for people, or she can punish them. And she's known to come in dreams to people in the Mende tribes in Sierra Leone, the people we primarily trade with. And our friend Beck Wheeler, an artist, used her as an inspiration for the image that's on the front of that box. That's big. And these are some of the masks that the Bondu Society wear when they're celebrating some of these mythical creatures. And that was what we used to sort of try and tell a story, even though we've got 0.3 seconds to do this in the supermarket. Try and tell a story about the origin of our product. And to honour this idea of cola, the truth behind the product was that it actually had this product in it, this ingredient. There's some cola in it there. Now these are big sketches, but in her words, when she was asked to do it, she said, "When I work on a job, I like to surround myself with reference material, and I love African dance and music, so the job was a dream for me. I listened to music from Sierra Leone, where the drinks, cola nuts come from, and then started to look into African deities. I based my first drawings on Mami Wata, an African water spirit who embodies both good and evil. The image went through many reincarnations before evolving into the final bottle illustration." Now weirdly, there's a story we didn't know before we met Chief Kari Bo, who's the chief of the village that we get our cola from. And there's a local legend about Mami Water that pertains to her. 7 generations ago, the chief of Boma, who was then a man, was visited by Mami Wata. And she comes to people in their dreams and their sleep. And she spoke to him saying that Boma would prosper on the condition that after him, all the future chiefs would be women.
Oh.
Nice.
This is 7 generations ago, so they were way ahead of us. Since then, her instructions have been followed to the letter, and all the chiefs have been women. Kari's mother taught her to be a chief. She was democratically elected, but because the village knew how well she'd been brought up to be able to lead them, they voted for her. Now it's her job to see that the people of Boma are fairly represented amongst each other and all the surrounding villages, and in the Barry Chieftain, which is part of the group, and to mediate disputes and lead the village. So when we first met her, we asked, "What's your view? What do you want to do? What's your legacy going to be as chief?" And she said, "I want an iron roof on every home in the village." Now the village is beautiful, it's got thatched roofs, it looks really lovely because of those thatched roofs. I looked at them and thought, why would we replace them with tin? You know, they look so kind of great. And that it would ruin the charm to just make them look like they had rusty roofs. But I really misunderstood what she was saying. And what I romantically saw in this rustic handmade natural material obscured the fact that dry homes with permanent roofs mean her community are healthier and safer. And today, thanks to her work and something to do with us helping her, there are more iron roofs at Boma than thatch ones. Now her goal was a really insightful summary to me of the thing that needed to go right for the people that she's leading and how she can improve their lives so that they can prosper. And I learnt not to judge her by her roofs. That my preconceptions, you know, it's not common for someone like her to be in charge of a village like this from what I thought. But in many Sierra Leonean communities, women played this pivotal role in their rural life. And in the pre-colonial era, female chiefs and war leaders were very common. And the pattern continues today. And there are, in the hierarchy of social order in Sierra Leone, there are paramount chiefs who sit above these village chiefs, and many of them are women as well. Now, on our first visit there, we arrived from New Zealand, Matthew Morrison, my partner, and I, business partner and I, and we travelled a day and a half, you know, a couple of aeroplane rides, taken the boat from Lungi Airport in Freetown across the bay to Freetown, which is in the middle of the night when the weather was really bad, and threw us around. Then drove for a day, then walked through the jungle, and then were greeted at the end of the road on this trail by a whole group of women dressed like some of them here. In fact, some of them are there. And a whole lot of devils dancing. It was we walked through this sort of undergrowth, well, not undergrowth, we walked down the track and heard these drums going. And then these guys appeared and started coming up at us. And I thought, this is like a haka, right? They're kind of having a crack at us, tell us that they are defiant and we should respect them. But one of them, this guy Gongoli, lifted his mask so that he could grin at me. And I kind of clocked him. I thought, that's interesting. I mean, and I thought he was just saying, it's okay, I'm not going to eat you. But he led me down, and Matthew and the rest of us, to where there was a bridge, that money that we'd sent that was raised from the sale of these drinks had gone into building. And the whole village were on it. It was an incredible moment. But since then I've read up about this character, Gongoli. And he's intentionally an outsider, a kind of a strange, misshapen, quite ugly, big-headed man who is like a jester, or in this masquerade, allows his mask to slip so he can relate to the audience and say, it's okay, it's just me. But he also speaks truth to power. Gongoli is a very powerful character in this structure because he allows us, kind of who don't know anything about these chiefs who are chiefs or other important ideas and people, to access them by taking the piss out, which is what he was doing to me. And that happened a few times when I was there. I was once, it's a bit rude, I was once bending down to take photographs of one of these dancers, and Mohammed, one of my friends that I made over there, I was showing my builder's craft. And he was laughing, pointing, and saying, I see the devil. So they're not afraid. Anyway, we also became, one of the most fantastic things about this was, and you see that there's a lot of these devils that come out and are allowed to come out to present themselves and the culture to Westerners like me. But this chap sitting in the middle of this forest is the village storyteller. And it's his job to make sure these stories are retold and retold. And the second time we went there, he took us and sat us with all of the chiefs in the middle of this special site in the rainforest, and started telling a story that I didn't really understand. He said that in the past their ancestors were being attacked by some giants, and they tricked them into climbing these trees, the trees we were sitting under. And we were sitting on the graves of these giants, because the giants didn't have any necks, so they couldn't turn around to look. So they just had to keep climbing, and they climbed until they couldn't climb anymore and they fell down.
Huh.
Then I saw this picture, and these are young men being initiated into the Poro society, and they look like they didn't have necks on. You know how they've got these great shawls and these masks. And I thought, well, maybe these are the giants. Maybe this is something that they're, trying to reinterpret. He told us another story, and the story was about Karma drinks, or Karma Cola. He said that many years ago, should we go back one? Some people from New Zealand had got in touch with them wanting cola nut, and they were very worried that they didn't have enough of it because they use it all the time, they need it. And then they waited a while, they found like 1 kilogram of this stuff and sent it to us, and they waited forever, and they didn't know what had happened to it. They're very generous, they never sent us a bill for it, they gave us these nuts. And then, it was actually, my view was that it took a little less time than the storyteller was saying, but he said they waited and waited and waited. And then these drinks arrived, a box of these. And they were going, what is this? The next thing that arrived, and this is 6 months after we made our first drink, we sent them a cheque for the first year's, we believe, worth of money that we'd make from selling the drinks. And it was a cheque for $10,000 US. And we put a few rules around it. We said, we don't know anything about what you should do with this. but we want you to spend it on all the community, not just the chiefs. So we give it to everyone to figure out what to do with it. Don't buy a casino, basically spend it on things that will benefit you, because we might not be here. There might not be another chief, we don't know. But you need to be able to benefit from it in the long term. So education is good, healthcare is good, things that give you economic independence. And they came back with this request for a bridge. And we thought, well, it's kind of a strange thing, but it's up to them, so we did that. And he told the story about how the bridge had enabled them to have better relationships with the paramount chief, because when he used to go to the village, he wouldn't get all the way in. He'd stop because he'd have to get his feet wet. Or he'd fall in the river. And the paramount chief is in there in the red jersey, red t-shirt on, was laughing about this too, because he's quite a big man. The storyteller was saying he would fall off the little log that he used to walk on. He actually drives a car. But the funny thing was, we had become part of the mythology, and everyone knew us because of that story. And there was a relationship that we had because we keep going back to see them, and because since then, more checks have gone, and they've done more with them. I think the moral of his story was that, and this is because they never sent an invoice, we never paid for those original nuts, was that they had been very generous, and that generosity had been paid back over and over again. Now these are the stories that I've learned because we dug a bit deeper to find out what it was that went into these drinks. But there's some other stories that advertising tell us. Now I found this fascinating because when I grew up in the 70s, there was an ad from Coca-Cola about Coca-Cola being the real thing, and about how if you drank a Coca-Cola you would become part of this counterculture. Now, among the Fuller and the Temne people and the Mende people in Sierra Leone, they believe that when a person is dead, they've turned back home. They're still with you in some way. It's a way of them honouring the people, their loved ones that have passed. And they believe that cola can be used to have a connection with them, to have a sort of ritualised way of maintaining a relationship with someone who's passed. So they say, he who brings cola brings life. Coke used to say Coke adds life. They also used to say it's a real thing. And they created this way of making that interesting to us, to people generally, by taking a counterculture that was challenging consumerism. You know, in the 70s, people had just realised, after the Club of Rome, a meeting amongst people looking at resources that manage the globe, and did some systems thinking analysis of all of the resources we have on this planet, and discovered that we were already using over 1 planet a year of resources, when we could only really use 1 because we only have 1. I think it's 5 times now. I don't know if anyone knows the most recent. The Club of Rome redid that survey 10 years ago, and it was 2.5 planets. So, to be able to claim that you can make change through consumerism is pretty difficult. I find it difficult. Ethically, should we buy more stuff? Probably not. But we should try and engage in things that are constructive, that understand this relationship. So I always found this sort of idea of consumerism being someone who makes a living out of selling things kind of conflicting. Perhaps the thing that Coke have given us, the greatest contribution to pop culture, is to reclaim Santa Claus. Now this is one of the stories I used to tell because I thought it made me sort of a bit clever and a bit cynical. But it's mostly bullshit. I mean, Coca-Cola weren't the first to take Santa Claus and turn him into a character for their own ends. In the 1880s and earlier, there were commercial illustrators that used them, as you saw, for lots of other commercial products. But no one's had a black one before. And this is Chief Hindua Kamara, who's married to Chief Kadipo. He's the chief of a neighbouring village in one of those wonderful marriages where they brought the 2 warring tribes together, perhaps. But we did this because he's such a smiley, happy guy. And he has been through hell. This man has seen his house blown up in the Civil War and ran and hid in the rainforest. He's the most resilient person I've ever met because he still has this smile on his face after everything he's experienced. And he's very willing to be our poster boy. So we just roll this out every Christmas. Like where am I? So this is the kind of crux of the thing. We make stuff to sell, and my job's to try and make it attractive so people buy it. I worry a lot about these stories that we tell. I think that if more people understand them, they'll make decisions differently. And a few years ago, we started this journey we've been on by importing bananas. We did it because we found out that of all the things the supermarket sells, bananas are the most sold single good after petrol, cigarettes and lottery tickets.
Wow.
That's in the UK. It's probably changed now. Maybe cigarettes have gone down a few notches. But we don't know what goes on before we see one of these bananas in the stores. And we discover that if you're going to buy a cheap banana, someone's not being paid. So we had to figure out a way to make people pay $1 more for one that we thought was a better choice. Because that's the right price. If you think about this, this has come all the way from Ecuador. We can't grow them here yet. And it's been shipped. It took 20 days to get here. It's been picked, it's been grown, it's been looked after. If it's in this nick and looks this good, someone spent a lot of time growing it and worrying about it. So to expect to pay a couple of dollars for a bunch like that is probably not great. Now not everyone can afford to spend $3.99 on a bunch of bananas instead of $2.99, but there is a difference. And understanding that and our kind of role in this is something that I still lose sleep over. We're also doing this with milk, in that we now believe that our contribution in this particular consumer good is to try and take land use and make it an issue. That you need a lot less land to grow oats and turn them into food than you do other types of milk. Now, a mentor for me all the way along this journey has been my friend Albert Tucker, who's from Sierra Leone. And every time I start telling a story to him, he reminds me that it's dangerous just to tell one. Now, the novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie talks about the danger of a single story. She tells us that our lives, cultures are composed of many overlapping stories and warns that if we hear only a single one about another person or another country, we risk a critical misunderstanding. And again, this is what we're confronted with today. We're seeing stories told through the lens of people who want to convince us to do things like I do. I want to persuade you all to buy a certain drink and a certain banana, a certain oat milk. Now, I believe what I'm saying is worth you listening to. I hope it is. But we're all confronted with all of this information all of the time, and we don't have the time to make these choices. So we've got to start trusting the sources of information. I'd suggest everyone read her books. She's incredible. But she also brings to our culture something that we have less understanding of than we used to. That storytelling is actually truth. That, we think of news as facts, but we know how editorial privilege changes what we believe. And that beliefs are really important, especially when we're confronted with the things we're confronted. I woke up and watched Al Jazeera at 6:30 this morning. It's been the same story for the last month. It's a month today. These things are, I guess one of the things I concern myself with is that we're living in New Zealand and all of these things are happening in a distant place. But the solace is that people like Albert are a connection for me with the rest of the world. And that I know there are people in these villages or in these banana plantations that are dependent on what I do here. And I think we all have this responsibility as global citizens. Another thing that I'm worrying about at the moment is that I keep hearing that we should be thinking more about our local communities, which I believe in. I'm very lucky that my family and I moved back here from the UK just after the pandemic started. And we have everything we need in our own neighbourhood. We can basically walk to it. It's a privilege. But not everyone has that fortune. I'm going to tell 2 more short stories. This is the bridge I talked about earlier. This is what the TY communities asked for when we first sent them money from selling these drinks. Since then, they've built 3 more bridges. And other villages have seen the impact of this, and it was a small thing. We didn't have to spend much money to do this. We basically tried to leverage every relationship we have over there to get people to join in and help build it. It was like a working bee with materials and some expertise that we managed to bring to it. And because the impact is more than just transport, it brings news and enables trade and kids to go to school. It has a really positive impact. A small amount of effort goes a long way in a place like this. And we've supplied 2 of the most remote TY communities with bridges now, as well as Boma, and with hand tools to do it themselves. So now we know that even if we're not there, this will carry on. But this one is the one that has the most impact on me. This woman's name is Hawa Ali. Now, she was orphaned during the Civil War. Her parents died through that conflict, and she was brought up by her aunt in Boma and went to school in neighbouring village, Sayahun. She's the first kid in this community of 2,000 people that we sort of help out to go to university. She studied medicine. She was admitted into the school a year ago. So because we've been helping young women get an education, so one of the things that we do with those donations is to ensure we have scholarships going to girls to go to school. She's had an opportunity that no one else in those villages has had before. And she's in her 2nd year at Naja University Medicine Faculty. Now, I couldn't be prouder of her other than my own kids. But I think that the point of this, for me, or the moral of these stories is, don't let the truth ruin a good story. The truth can tell an even better one. And that just having time to do this, because again, most of the opportunity I have to convince people doesn't take half an hour or however long this is taken. It's 0.3 seconds in front of a product in a supermarket or a store. But having a story you can share means that you've got something that people can value and share as well. Now, this morning before I got here, Albert sent me a picture. This is an old picture of him in the middle with the person who administers our funds over there, Michael Salu, and some of the farmers from Boma, and Chief Hanua to his left. And this is the roof that's just on a school that we've helped build in Sayahun that went up yesterday. So thank you. Anyone who's bought any of these products has made that happen. And that's me.